This morning we are on the line with Stephen L. Moore, who is the author of an amazing book about an amazing person. It's called Beyond the Call of Duty, The Life of Colonel Robert Howard, America's Most Decorated Green Beret. And our visit is presented by Marcus & Mack, voted Best Law Firm and Best Personal Injury Lawyer 3 years in a row in the Best of Indiana County contest. You can visit them online at marcusandmack.com. And Stephen Moore is on the line with us this morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Todd. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad you're here because this is an amazing gentleman about which you've written, Robert Howard. Just a small-town Alabama boy with not much going on in his life, huh?
Pretty much, but he made something of himself as life went on.
Yeah, he certainly did, and distinguished himself in an amazing way in Vietnam. The thing about him that really strikes me is it's not that the guy had no fear, it's that the guy had no qualms about heading into battle and defending his fellow service members. That was really good to him, wasn't it, or big for him?
It was, and those guys respected Bob Howard immensely. They knew if they got in trouble on a special ops mission, he would be the first to come in after and try to rescue them. So that gave him a lot of confidence.
He was wounded how many times?
By his count, he was wounded 14 times. Officially, they processed 8 Purple Hearts for him. A few of them probably just went without the paperwork being processed, according to Howard.
And the medals that he won. When you say America's Most Decorated Green Beret, you're not kidding, and there's nothing exaggerated about that. In fact, he was informed in the midst of a battle about his having won one of the big medals that he won. This guy just didn't mess around.
Yeah, that was when he finally received notice that he needed to report to the White House to receive the Medal of Honor after having been written up for it 3 previous times and receiving 2 Distinguished Service Crosses, which is the highest award the Army can issue, short of Congress issuing the Medal of Honor.
One of the interesting things to me about any of our military heroes is that when they are awarded these great honors, our country doesn't just go on the word of somebody who was fighting alongside of that person. They really investigate and find out what happened to make this distinction so necessary. And when you read the citations for the Distinguished Service Cross or for the Medal of Honor, and you realize what these guys can do and what they are willing to do in the heat of battle, it really is amazing. But what made this particular man such a hero for us? Why was he so driven?
He was a volunteer when he didn't have to be. He had a supply sergeant role at the recon base, but he was what they called a strap hanger, or somebody that would volunteer to go on a mission just because he wanted to be in combat. He wanted to fight. He'd been shot in the head earlier on a previous tour of Vietnam and survived that. So he was all about getting out there and mixing it up and doing the best he could for his country to create the most havoc he could with the enemy forces that were present.
For one of his medals, he actually jumped out of a helicopter and was basically firing before he hit the ground in order to allow the rest of his mates to get out of the helicopter when it did land. He was that kind of a guy, but I was particularly stricken by him having been shot and wounded and unable to stand up and support himself, crawling under the enemy fire to rescue a fallen comrade. Superior officer, as a matter of fact. That story really seems to encapsulate the guy.
Yeah, that was called a bright light mission. That's what the MACB Green Berets called it, where you either go in to rescue a downed fellow man or to recover their body and bring it back home for final honors. And that was what they were doing, was trying to bring back a downed teammate. And there were a lot of casualties that ensued in the process of trying to make that mission successful. But Howard saved a lot of lives. As you mentioned, he was badly wounded and continued to fight for many hours, even going beyond darkness when it looked like there was no real hope of being extracted from that position.
He was also in one of the elite fighting units that was really a covert unit that really his story didn't get out of what he actually did. And and the medals that he earned there. And it's really inspiring to read the way that you lay that out for us, and we begin to understand what made this guy go. Where did you find the story of Robert Howard?
My uncle-in-law, Wilson Hunt, was a MAC-VSOG team leader in Vietnam, and he served with Bob Howard in 1968. And he and his comrades spoke highly of Howard and how courageous he was. And I interviewed many, many dozens of these Green Berets and putting together some of their stories. And it just felt like something I needed to do was to go back and put Bob Howard's story together on his own, because he was just such an outstanding individual, according to the men who served with him.
Was it a story that was well known when you came to it?
Bob Howard was pretty well known, but of course in the 1960s and 1970s, when he's receiving all these medals, they don't accurately depict where the missions took place, such as Cambodia and Laos. The SOG warriors, they were denied by the government. If they were killed or captured, the U.S. government would say, we have no idea what they were doing over there. And they couldn't speak about these missions for decades afterwards. They were sworn to secrecy. So his valor was known, but the exact details of some of what he did came to light, years later, as books on MAC-VSOG can finally be written these days.
And you had access to some materials that nobody else has ever had before either, did you not?
Yeah, I did another book on MAC-VSOG about 10 years back that included my uncle and a lot of his stories, but I interviewed more than 100 men, including Brigadier General Jack Singlaub, who in 1968 was Chief SOG, or head of special operations in Vietnam. So I had access to helicopter pilots, airmen, Green Berets, a wide variety of people that served. And a lot of their oral history is the best that we have. Some of the mission notes have been destroyed over time because of classified nature. But I feel fortunate to have interviewed so many of these men and try to capture some of what they did.
Bob Howard, after his military service was over and he was back living here in America, he also made a lot of trips to Iraq to visit with active duty troops over there. What was behind his motivation to do that?
I think he was happy to put a uniform back on, but he and other Medal of Honor recipients would go back to places like Afghanistan and Iraq to give motivational speeches to the troops, to encourage them, to let them know that what they were doing was not forgotten back at home in America. Because he didn't receive that kind of accolades when he returned from Vietnam. It wasn't a popular war, if you will, but he knew what these guys were doing over there, and he knew that it mattered, and it was important to him. Up until the point in about 2009 where cancer started catching up with him, he was very actively involved in these overseas flights to go see the service personnel.
He was awarded the Medal of Honor, 8 Purple Hearts, the Distinguished Service Cross, a Silver Star, 4 Bronze Stars. We need to get to know guys like Colonel Robert Howard, and through Stephen Moore, we're able to do that. The book is Beyond the Call of Duty, The Life of Colonel Robert Howard, America's Most Decorated Green Beret. Since the book has been published and others have read it, I'm sure that you've heard other stories about him and about life. It's probably one of those books that really gets vets to open up, doesn't it?
It is. I mean, these guys have to open up and share these stories, and I'm fortunate that so many of them have. And I hope that some other stories come out now after the book is released today, and maybe we'll learn more about Bob Howard that could go into a future edition.
I'm sure it will. Beyond the Call of Duty by Stephen Elmore. It is on sale as of today. The Life of Colonel Robert Howard, America's Most Decorated Green Beret. Thank you so much for spending some time with us this morning and introducing us to him.
Thank you for having me, Todd. It's been a pleasure.
Have a great day.
You too.
It is the voice of Indiana County. It's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, and WCCSradio.com.